Eternity's Echo, JFK's Last Stand, Chapter 6, Many Worlds, Science or Myth. JFK lingers for a while at the tunnel to creation in 2018. The atmosphere is tense as Jack and Dr. Strauss, as well as his assistant Emily, discuss the antimatter issue, how it arose, and what might be some solutions to the rift that developed. After a time, Kennedy pauses the discussion. I want to thank you both for your time, doctors, but I must return to Washington to 1962. There's a nuclear war that could be pending over there with the Soviet Union. And Dr. Krauss tries to assure the president that it will be okay. The Cuban Missile Crisis, it was a scare, but there was no war. You have nothing to worry about. You will be okay over there, so you can stay here as long as you like. Then Krauss adds, look, the Earth is still here, so it came out okay. We're still here, so there isn't much to worry about, right? I mean, we're still here. But Kennedy remains weary. That may be true, Doctor, but in what reality? Is this the reality I'm in now, the future of my world, or the future of another world? The president's keen insight, having grasped the many worlds theory, catches Krauss off guard, and the scientist has no answer. He can't say for certain what future this world now represents. JFK is right. He may be in a world very similar to his own, a future version of it, but it doesn't mean it's the very world where he came from in 1962. Kennedy continues, I have to make sure that we're safe back on Earth back in 1962. I'm the president, that's my job. And besides, I need to go back and consult about the problem here with my scientific advisor, Dr. Hugh Everett III. Dr. Krauss feels slighted. One of history's greatest presidents is choosing another scientist over him, buying into Everett's theories completely. Mr. President, this many worlds theory, it is a speculative math. The Everett may have been brilliant with occasions, but he wasn't a physicist in a true sense, and now you're considering risking everything based on his unproven theory? And JFK calm but firm says, Dr. Krauss, theories often start as abstractions, but they point us toward the possibilities. And this rift, whatever it is, suggests there may be more to Everett's ideas than you're even willing to acknowledge. Krauss is skeptical. The possibilities? No one's ever seen these other worlds. It's all theoretical, nothing tangible. It's like putting faith in something you cannot prove. We need hard evidence, not just conjecture. And JFK Resolute says, well, we may not have the proof right now, but we can't ignore the danger. The stakes are too high to dismiss any possibility, no matter how remote. Boldness must be tempered with caution, Dr. Krauss, or it becomes recklessness. And we'll deal with this rift and its consequences our way from 1962, but I need to return to my responsibilities there in Washington. And Krauss says grudgingly, and once in Washington, what do you plan to do there, Mr. President? And JFK says determined, I'm going to do everything I can to help you, Dr. Krauss, and when I return, I'll be bringing one of the brightest minds I know, Hugh Everett III. Hugh's been working with me on our own crisis, and together we can get to the bottom of this. The president then turns and walks over to where the portal is, going back through it and re-entering 1962, finding himself in the Oval Office again. He's greeted by Bobby, who brings him crucial news. Jack, we've got a breakthrough. I just spoke with a Russian diplomat. The deal you proposed, Atalai's deal, the deal's on the table. JFK, cautious but hopeful, says, so what's their offer, Bobby? And Bobby says, well, we pull our missiles out of Turkey quietly, and they'll remove theirs from Cuba. Adelaide's proposal, Jack, Adelaide. Both sides get what they need without losing any face. And JFK nods. Well, that's good news, Bobby, but we're not out of the woods yet. Make sure the details are ironclad before we move forward. And Bobby, pausing, sensing Jack's hesitation, says, "Jack, what's on your mind? You seem troubled." And Jack sighs. "It's this Krauss fellow over at 2018. He tore into Hugh something awful. He called the many worlds theory speculative and said we're risking everything on a mathematician's fantasy. I can't shake that feeling, Bobby. Are we betting on the right quarterback? You and I can run long and hard, but if our quarterback doesn't know how to get us the ball..." But Bobby cuts in thoughtful. "Jack, Hugh's been right before. He sees things differently, that's true, but that's what makes him so valuable. Sometimes you need someone who can see the play no one else sees. But you're my brother, and I know you're the smartest of almost all of us. If you have your doubts, maybe it's time we test this Hugh Everett's mettle after all." And Jack says, resolved, "You're right, Bobby. We keep Everett in the game, but we make sure he's ready for what's coming. We can't afford to be wrong on this one. This is bigger than even a nuclear war. This is antimatter, and we don't know how much of it is involved." Later that day, when there's some privacy and the advisors leave the office, a resolution to the Cuban Missile Crisis nearly in place, Jack meets with Hugh Everett. "Congratulations, Mr. President." "Hugh, I couldn't have done it without you. You backed off those generals." Then Jack grows grim. "Hugh, we've got a situation brewing, a second one. It's a lab in the future. It's in 2018. On Long Island, it's called the Tunnel to Creation. And there's something dark on the other side there, and it's taken control of the place. They've opened up the door, and we have to find a way to close that door." JFK then elaborates. "And the fact that this occurs in the future doesn't mean much, because the portal came back to me in the Oval Office in 1962. That means that we're as much at risk as they are." And Everett says, "It's a funny thing, Mr. President. I don't place a lot of faith in intuition. There's no mathematical correlate, but I had a sense about a temporal disturbance of sorts. I hoped it was just a bad feeling, but apparently it's not. As far as a rift developing, well, that's very concerning, Mr. President. Given the nature of these experiments that they must be running and knowing how scientific endeavors tend to scale things up over time, well, I'd speculate they're operating on a much larger scale than anything we've ever dealt with antimatter in the past. So this antimatter, it isn't just some new discovery. No, Mr. President, antimatter has been a part of theoretical physics for a long time. The first signs we observed were back in the 1930s, but what they're doing now, whatever scale they're working at, it's pushing the boundaries in ways we never could have imagined back then. The consequences could be far-flung beyond comprehension." And JFK says resolute, "We need to be ready, Hugh. Once we fully resolve this Cuba crisis, we're going to tackle this head on, and I need you to be prepared for whatever comes next." And Everett says determined, "I'm ready, Mr. President. We'll confront this together." Back at the Tunnel to Creation in 2018, and after Jack's departure, the scientists, led by Dr. Krauss and his assistant Emily, frantically assess the situation as the rift looms over the lab. Krauss, frustrated, paces the interior. "This isn't just a simple portal. It is far more complex. We've torn through something and now it's here. This rift, it is not just a tear in reality. It's like it is alive." And Emily, nervous, says, "Dr. Krauss, the rift is spreading. It's feeding on the energy from the experiments we're performing, and it's growing stronger. I can't quantify how large it's become or where it's reaching to." And Dr. Krauss says grimly, "We need to calculate how far the damage goes. Does it reach all the way back beyond 1962 or possibly the future?" "Meaning?" Emily asks. "We need to get control of this situation. We have lost control of it. It has us in its grip." Later that evening, a nearly abandoned lab is witness to the presence of the rift. a palpable presence, a terrifying one. I am no mere accident. I am chaos. I am destruction. I am the unraveling of all that is. The order that these humans seem to cling to will soon be undone. I will consume their reality and all the others. They are no longer observers and scientists. They are my prisoners, trapped in the siege of their own making. The Rift's voice echoes ominously, growing louder as it talks, insistent as its presence looms over the lab. They're going to wish they had never invited me into their lives. As JFK resettles in Washington his familiar digs in 1962, his mind races with doubts about Hugh Everett's theories and the unsettling implication of Dr. Krauss's words. The resolution to the Cuban Missile Crisis seems within grasp, yet the president's thoughts are consumed by the ominous presence growing within the tunnel to creation. Back in 2018, the rift there isn't just expanding, it's waking up. A malevolent force now aware of its own existence, with its gaze set on unraveling everything in its path.